so what I want to do is just spend a bit of time on the complex domain. This is some new work we're doing. Just to say on this, complexity has started to take off the last year. It's actually quite interesting to watch it. I've been through fads a few times, and this is more than a fad, it's a paradigm shift. The way you know it happens is when the charlatan and the snake oil salesmen start to publish books in which they rebadge old methods with new language. And anybody who knows their Bible knows that new wine into old wineskins is a bad idea. And you actually see an awful lot of this. And the way you detect it is if they've got methods that have been around for years, and they just rebadge them with language they partly understand, you worry about it. And there's a whole bunch of popular books coming out on this at the moment, right? Now, it's good and bad news because it means the ideas are ready to take off, but how they take off then becomes key. Yeah? So one of the things we've done is to create a slightly more familiar model. This is a 3x3 matrix. I couldn't quite bring myself to do a 2x2. And basically, this is a transition. So this is between chaos and complicated. This is called the line of coherence. I'm going to go through this because it's important on projects. And the form of this is designed so other people can create other versions of this with different labels. It's not designed to be exclusive. Okay? So here I'm looking at the degree of consensus. Is it a small group of people, the cognoscenti? Is it orthodoxy, or a word from the resilience literature, synchrony? Is everybody in step? Yeah? And I want to look at that against the type of evidence. Is it gut feel? Is it inductive? Or is it truth? By which I mean beyond reasonable doubt, but that wouldn't fit on the slide, right? So, yeah, set the compromise on that. Now, actually, that means we have some interesting phenomena. The idea is what you should be is on this line. So, as novel ideas come through, they come through here, and you should really be gaining acceptance as you gain evidence, until you move from exploration, which is what complexity is about, to exploitation, which is what complicated is about. And that oscillation between exploration, exploitation, complex, complicated is key. And actually what happens down here is you get a lot of oscillation down here, but then it dampens. Now the reality is not many people aware of that, so what normally happens is you end up with people over here. Yeah? They're a small group of people and they've got the truth, and the trouble is they know they've got the truth, so they tell everybody else they've got the truth. And then when that doesn't work, they tell everybody else why they're wrong and why they should be listened to, and then wonder why they get taken out into the village square, tied to a stake, brushwood is brought out, and people with high torches arrive. Yeah? Now the reality is most organisations have a lot of these people, I've been one of them, and actually one of the things they've got to learn is they've got to pull backwards in order to go up. That actually gives leadership two different types of strategy. One is to provide them with coaches or mediators. This is actually very effective, because these guys can't explain what they're doing to the wider organisation. And actually this is something that recently retired or soon to retire people are actually very good at. And we're now actually getting people held on contracts for this sort of work to mediate novel ideas. And there's a thing called the grandparent syndrome, if you don't know it, which is grandparents will tell things to grandchildren that they won't tell to their own children, and grandchildren will tell things to their grandparents they won't tell. The argument is actually grandparents used to be the primary child carers, but also grandchildren are no threat to the grandparent, they're a considerable threat to the parent, right? Or within companies. So this concept of using older with people more experienced with networks to mediate this stuff means that you pull it back on there. The other approach is to actually put things in a sandpit or skunk works, which means you hide things away until there's so much evidence you can shift it up there. Now, what we're trying to do with this is not be totally authentic to complexity, but to give things to managers and leaders that they can understand so they start to take actions consistent with the theory, and that's key at this stage. Right? That's what we're doing. You then get the bad stuff. That's not too bad. So basically, people have only got cases, but there's no dissent anymore. And that's actually quite dangerous. Yeah, it's not totally dangerous yet, so you need to challenge that, yeah, or arrange for it to be challenged. The real problem is here, where everybody's in step, but there's no evidence. So think subprime lending, if you want an example of this. And actually, synchrony is an early sign of catastrophic failure. Yeah, if you look at any of the resilience literature, all the cases actually show that. So this is actually very dangerous, and you really need to detect it. And again, this is the human sensor network, weak signal detection. As you start to get people, it becomes orthodoxy. You don't have lots of people arguing about things, and there isn't evidence yet. You want to break it up fast. Yeah? Because it's worrying where you're going. And of course then, this is where most projects start. I.e. people start projects when there's enough evidence to buy into things and enough people agree. And that's fine, because projects start there, software programs start there, cultural change programs start there. They move into production and they go up there. The trouble is they're missing that. Yeah? This is actually the stage. A lot of things that go wrong with software projects is we actually don't deal the safe-to-fail experimentation really on in the cycle. So that gives us two different types of approach that we want to build in. One of those is what I've talked about, is portfolio-based parallelism, safe-to-fail experiments. You don't allow things to form in this space until you've taken some sort of experimental, evolutionary, action-based approach to work out what should happen. Now, I'm in Sydney next week on the Agile conference. This stuff has been taken up big time by the Agile community. In fact, Konami has almost become a standard model in that community now, which is nice. And then before that, you have the stuff I'm going to go on to talk about, which is micro-narrative. So we're doing work now, for example, for user requirements capture. You don't send out systems analysts to interview people because that biases the result. If you don't know it, if anybody conducts more than 3 interviews, their brain forms a subconscious hypothesis, and they only hear things that match that hypothesis thereafter. And if they say their academic training prevents it, they probably formed a hypothesis before the first interview. So actually, this is where we need to get larger data. So what we're doing is getting a sample of the user population to actually keep day-to-day stories of frustrations, things that work, don't work, ideas they've got, fragmented stuff. When we get cluster patterns in the indexing, then we develop experimental software for those cluster patterns. And then if it's used and stabilized, then it moves up. Yeah, lean startup is a fashionable phrase for this, but I don't like that one. It's kind of like on that.